Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Sophie again. We are on Mental Health Hour show at this Blossom Dispara Media TV. Today we'll address something very important, self-love. Um, a few days ago, I had an event where we were talking about self-love, and I realized most people do not understand what self-love is. And some do understand, but they don't know what are these practices of self-love. And what is self-love? I mean, most people will think self-love is completely loving yourself, not being able to give space to other people. But we have to understand there's a difference between self-love and self-absorption, because self-love is where you first love yourself so that you are able to extend the love, care, the kindness to the other person. But if it is self-absorption is where you're not able to accommodate other person. So for those who understand what self-love is, it's important to just compare, do I really have self-love or it's self-absorption? But anyway, let's talk about self-love. Self-love, one, is accepting yourself for who you are, both with the perfect sides, the flaws, the imperfections. You accept yourself as you are. Number two, we have self-love as a boundary, like where you are able to set boundaries for yourself. And when you talk about setting boundaries, it's where you communicate who you are and who you are not. Self-love also is taking care of yourself, taking care of your mind, taking care of your body, taking care of your spirit, wholesomely. That is how self-love can come in many forms. You realize that we can say self-love is taking care of your hair, taking care of your nails, but if it's self-love, are you doing it for yourself? And I'm not against those people who take care of themselves and they want to look good. No, I'm not against that. But as much as you want to look good outside, what are you doing in your inner side? And that you've seen people, maybe the young girls who are extremely going to the gym and they really want to look good. That is the exercise. Like it's from the external. But we have the inner side. What are you doing within yourself? What are you pouring within yourself? That's where we call the self-love. So in terms of loving yourself, have you accepted yourself? Let me first talk about self-acceptance. And the self-acceptance is accepting how you are. Like, how do I look from the physical? How do I look? Am I okay with my height? Am I okay with my size? Am I okay with how I talk? Am I okay? Self-acceptance physically. And then you have self-acceptance from where you come from. I mean, most people will not want to associate themselves with where they come from. If it's for those who come from the rural areas, you see someone who is ashamed of showing where they come from. Someone is also ashamed of showing maybe their parents, maybe because of the social economic status. But now you also, if you want to really practice self-love, it has to come from a place of self-acceptance. Do you really accept yourself? Do you also accept where you're coming from? And also, do you accept where you are as at that point? That is self-acceptance. You can only practice self-love. You can only experience the self-love if you have the self-acceptance. Then we have something also known as self-compassion. The love, the kindness that you extend to other people. Are you able to extend the same to yourself, especially when you're going through difficult moments? Or maybe you are so hard on yourself, you criticize so much about yourself. If you are one of those people who criticize themselves, then it means the self-compassion is lacking, and therefore you will not be able to experience the self-love. So it's always important to extend that love. Be kind to yourself. Stop being hard on yourself. Just appreciate that I'm going through a difficult season and I'm doing the best that I can. I'm having I'm in the right capacity to only extend myself to this much. So if you're not able to do something extra in that difficult situation, you really do not have to be hard on yourself. You don't have to highly criticize yourself. Just appreciate yourself and believe that you're doing the best that you can. And also believe that you are enough. Then the other thing that I can talk about is self-forgiveness. How many people have been holding on to their past mistakes? How many times are you still holding on your past hurtings, the past resentment? We cannot experience self-love if you're still holding on onto the things that hurt you. You need to look at, well, this issue happened, I felt betrayed at this point, but I should stop blaming myself. But I should no longer stop holding on onto those things. You should stop blaming yourself for the past mistakes. Set yourself free, you know. Just forgive yourself. Allow yourself to, sometimes usually say, I forgive them. But what about yourself? Have you really forgiven yourself? When you see like that person who made you feel betrayed, what emotions come with those, the fact that you're able to see that person? What emotions comes through? And if you're always triggered by someone who is maybe someone who betrayed you, meaning you could have forgiven the person, but yourself, you haven't dealt with the issues. You still have the unresolved emotions that are coming from the situation, or you're being triggered by that person. So it's always important to practice self-forgiveness. And you know, we are always making mistakes. No one is perfect, but after it has happened, are you still going to hold on to that past? Are you still going to hold on to that hurt, the past hurt? No, you need to forgive yourself so that you can be in a position to experience the self-love and also practice this self-love in a very easy way. The other thing is also self-empowerment. How are you empowering yourself? What are you doing? Maybe if it is an area that you're struggling with, how are you getting information to improve on that area? Maybe you're struggling with finances. What can you do to empower yourself in terms of finances? If you're struggling with relationships, what am I going to do to empower myself in terms of relationships? If it is maybe unresolved traumatic experiences, how are you going to address this traumatic? You have to empower yourself, especially the areas that are bringing out the weak side. And we've said we have to accept our imperfections, we have to accept our flaws, but as much as we are accepting them, how are we empowering yourself? How are we working on these imperfections? How are we working on these weaknesses? So, and that's how we self-empower. So we've mentioned the 3 ways, or we've mentioned 4 ways that can allow you to really say, I'm experiencing self-love. And talked about the self-compassion, we've talked about the self-acceptance, the self-forgiveness. You just have to forgive yourself. And we've also talked the self-empowerment. So let us look at issues that can make you think that you do not have self-love. And we will look at number 1, relationships. How do you relate with other people? Remember, if you do not have self-love, you usually experience feelings of inadequacy, insecurities, so many issues that make you feel that you do not fit in among people or in a social circle. So what you usually do if you do not have self-love, you end up withdrawing or isolating because you do not feel that you are fit for that social circle. So number 1 is how if you are really struggling, you either feel that I do not fit in, I do not belong, all that, that is a symptom, or it's a sign to show that you do not have self-love. Now, those people who do not have self-love, number 2, what they usually do, they seek for external validation. Still, how they relate with people. And you know, it can be really, really exhausting when you want to always seek validation from others. I mean, assume that you're in a relationship and every time you want assurance, hello, Do you still do this? Do you still love me? Do you still, why you're always seeking validation from the external sources. And it's because you are lacking self-love. That the love should come from you, and then you will validate yourself, and you will not rely on any other person to validate you. You will not rely on other people to validate you. And remember, when you put expectations so that you can be validated by someone else, you will definitely be disappointed, and you'll end up feeling that you're not loved or you do not belong, you know. So we've mentioned in terms of relationship, if you have a struggle in relationship, you just need to just check, how is my self-love? Do I love myself enough? Number two, validation. Do I seek a validation from the external sources, or I can get the validation from myself? Then the other thing that you can look at so that you can learn that you do not have self-love is probably resentment, or the bitterness that you hold for a long time. Imagine holding on to bitterness for the last maybe 3 years, 4 years. You're not doing justice to yourself, because every time you'll be ruminating on that negative thoughts, or you'll be holding on onto the negative feelings of bitterness, and you will also be holding on to the people who made you feel that way. You need to set yourself free so that you can at least experience joy, you can experience happiness, you can experience the love that people give. So it's always important to look at why am I resentful? Why am I feeling bitter? And how long have I been bitter? How long am I willing to hold on to this bitterness, of which these negative emotions are not so good to be maintained in the body for the long time. And instead, okay, I will not go to the biological side of things, but always address them, your resentment, address your bitterness, so that you can experience the self-love. The other thing to know that you do not have self-love is expressing yourself, or we can call it communication. Because what happens if you lack self-love, you're afraid that if I express myself, the other person will be hurt and they may leave me or abandon me. But what you do is you just withhold whatever you're supposed to say. But I mean, if you are hurt by someone, you need to communicate. If you're feeling sad, you have to communicate. If you're feeling happy, you just have to communicate. But then when it comes to expressing ourselves, we look at how we were brought up as children. Maybe you are not in a position to express yourself because your caregivers or your parents did not allow you to express yourself. And I liked it that someone the other day asked me a question. Hey, Sophie, why is it that when someone says hurtful things to me, I will show that I'm okay, but the moment the person has left, I will now break down? And I had to ask her how she will resolve her emotions when she was growing up. And she told me maybe she could just go to the bedroom, you could just cry and then come back and show that you're happy. So it shows that your caregivers did not allow you to express yourself in their presence, because you are either punished, especially in the African culture. You see a child who is crying, and the child is crying because she or he is uncomfortable. But instead of taking a step to understand why is this child crying, you either slap her or you just ignore the child. And because the child do not want to see your negative reaction or your negative response, what the child does is she'll rather hide her emotions so that she can receive the love from you. And that is where we go. It becomes like a skill. As you grow up, you realize I need to hide how I express my emotions so that I can continue maintaining these people. Just as you used to do when you were small. You could not express your emotions because you want to keep these parents. You want to experience the love from your parents, because you believed if I show them these emotions, they may not love me enough. And so it became a skill for you to not express yourself. But what is it doing to your self-love? What are you doing to yourself? I mean, if you are 20 years and you cannot express yourself, then it means you have to work on yourself. You have to work on yourself so that you can experience the self-love. So it is important for you to understand why am I not able to express my emotions? Even for those who are in relationships or even in marriage, you'll find people who are not able to express themselves, of which it's really a sad thing. I mean, we are supposed to enjoy life. We are supposed to experience the existence of just me being in the world. But if you cannot have this experience because you cannot express yourself, can you imagine how you will be 30 years later, 40 years later, you can still not express yourself? So during the self-love, for those people who cannot express themselves, they cannot be in a position to experience that self-love because they cannot express themselves. And then how else are you able to know that this person is not, does not have self-love? And you can also look at maybe people who stick in toxic relationships because they're afraid of being alone. There are people who believe I cannot be alone by myself because they don't believe they are enough. And I want you to each and every day remind yourself that I'm enough. I'm in this world because I'm enough. I'm in this family because I am enough. I have all it takes. It comes from a place of acceptance. And the reason as to why people remain in toxic relationships is because they have not appreciated themselves. They have not accepted that they are enough. And that's why they need someone extra who will always make them complete, who will, they feel like this other person will make them feel complete or will make them feel enough, you know. And we have seen stories of maybe young men, young women who are still staying in toxic relationships because they do not have the self-love, they do not understand that they are enough, they do not understand that they're the best, just as they are. So always remember that you are enough, you are the best. Always tell your mind, always remind yourself. You really do not, if you're staying in a very toxic place, even in the workplaces, you don't have to stay in a place where you're not respected. Just allow yourself to experience the self-love by maybe living there. You are able to identify that this place is toxic, maybe a toxic workplace or a toxic relationship. And from that, you're able to experience self-love. So let us talk about how you practice self-love. And we'll start with setting boundaries. Most of us do not have the values and principles that run your life. I mean, if you are not assertive enough about your principles, about your values, anyone will step in your space. And boundaries communicates who you are and who you are not. Let people understand this is how much I can allow you in my space and this is how much you are not allowed in this space. So how are your boundaries? Do you really know your boundaries? And I usually give an example of boundaries as a garden that is not fenced. You can only experience self-love if you are able to set your boundaries and communicate those boundaries clearly. Back to the garden. If a garden is not well fenced, what do you think people will do? Everyone will have an access to that garden. They will just trespass. Can you imagine anyone, even animals? Animals will also trespass in that garden. I want you to relate on how lack of setting boundaries, how bad it is. It can really have a negative impact on us. You go to a place, someone gets into your space and you're not able to communicate your boundaries. You know, it's always important because every time someone steps into your space, well, you will feel sad, you will feel hurt, but you will not express that you cannot cross this line. And by the end of the day, you will feel sad because you did not set your boundaries, did not communicate your boundaries. So I will urge you to set your boundaries clearly and communicate them to people. Let them understand. If you are a timekeeper, let people understand that you like people who respect time. Like if someone is not able to respect your time, let them understand the repercussions or the consequences of not keeping time. If it is your space, how do you like your space to be? You know, always communicate your boundaries. Then Number 2, how you can practice self-love is gratitude. Always appreciate the things that you have achieved, the things that are within you, if your heart is beating, appreciate. I mean, some of us have so many noises that you don't even recognize that your heart is beating, or that your muscles are twitching. Like, there's so much noise that we are not able, so much noise out here that we are not able to appreciate. Just gratitude, just being grateful for even being alive, being grateful for being part of that family, just being grateful for just being healthy. Self-love is very important. Appreciate the small milestones, and if there are difficulties, appreciate that, well, I have experienced this difficulty, but how did I go through it? How did I overcome this difficulty, and how am I going to do it next time? So that is gratitude, just being grateful for the things that are in your life, the things that are yet to come, the environment. You can appreciate the nature. I mean, there are so many things to be happy for, even the friends that you have. It's always important to practice gratitude. The other thing, and I think I mentioned it, for you to experience self-love is acceptance, self-acceptance. Just accept your flaws, accept your weaknesses. We talked about it as we started our show. Always remember to accept just as who you are. You do not have, the moment you've accepted who you are, even if someone tells you otherwise, it will not affect you, because you already know who you are. But if you're not coming from a place of acceptance, if someone tells you a negative opinion or a negative feedback, you will not be in a position to take it well, or you will not process that so well, because you're not coming from a place of acceptance. So it's always important to check the areas that are making you not practice self-love. The other thing is, for you to practice self-love, is always talk positive to yourself. I know we could have those negative, critical voices in our heads, but always learn. You can even go to a professional who will help you address those negative self-talk, so that you can now acquire the positive ones. So if you have the negative self-talk, it could be very hard to experience self-love. So I will advise that you can at least try to talk positive about yourself. Wake up, just say, I'm enough, I'm the best, I'm going to do this work like this and this. Like, talk positive, because when you do not talk positive to yourself, your mind tends to incline to the negative things. And by the end of the day, you will just be experiencing the negative things, and you'll be wondering, why am I always experiencing the negative things? But I told you, the moment you have the negative thoughts affect how we behave. And probably we could find we are not behaving in a good manner, or whatever we're experiencing is really affecting us because of our behaviors. So it's always important to talk positive. If you are really struggling with the negative self-talk, get someone to help you with the positive, to address. Because what happens, sometimes you need someone to walk you through, to understand, where is this negative self-talk coming from, so that now they can help you reframe. You reframe your mind so that you can start having the positive talk. And the moment you start having the positive self-talk, you start experiencing self-love. Yes. So yeah, you can also, the last one that we'll want to talk about, how you can improve on your self-love, is how your interpersonal skills. Just look at how do you relate with people. I always say we are social beings, and it is in our DNA. We are social beings, and no, we can't change that. So how do you relate with people? For you to have good self-love, for you to experience self-love, it's where you will be able to improve on your relationships with people, so that you can have a group of people where you belong or you fit in. And I'm not saying that you force yourself to just fit in. You have to look for people who love you just as you are, people who celebrate you, people who can tolerate you, both with your perfections and with your flaws, you know. So for you to start experiencing this self-love, start identifying the people who appreciate you just as you are. So that is our episode on self-love. If you have any issues on self-love, just ask any question. We'll be in a position to address. Thank you so much. Let's meet in the other show. What else would you want us to address? Let me know so that we can talk more about mental issues. Thank you and have a lovely evening.